cheers to another episode of the Weinnotes podcast. I'm your guide, AJ Weinzettel, on this journey of stories showcasing the people behind the wonderful world of wine, where we dive into conversations ranging from terroir, viticulture, to favorite music, superpowers, and more. Please enjoy this episode of the Weinnotes podcast. Ben, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me to chat for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm here in Oregon, and I've heard, obviously a lot about the harvest being fast and furious for us here, and California has had quite a unique harvest as well, but I haven't heard anything about what harvest has been like for Colorado.
Well, my harvest was pretty quick from my vineyard. Like it all comes in within like 2 or 3 weeks, to be honest. So it's only if I'm getting fruit from someone else, or like if I'm doing like a sparkling base that kind of prolongs it. So I got some Riesling in for like a Method Champenois beginning of September, and then I got my last grapes in. We picked Cabernet Sauvignon November 8th. So recently,
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very, very recently. Is the 2023 vintage looking pretty good for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like kind of lower on yield. We were unfortunate late May. We had like a hailstorm at the vineyard just around like bud break, and that kind of wiped out some primary buds on those early pushing varieties like Chardonnay. So our yields were down, but yeah, I mean the wines are good. I mean, like the cab that we just picked is looking really good. Riesling is great. The Method Champenois base wine is good. Like we had a small crop of Pinot Noir as well this year, but yeah, all looking good.
Well, good. I can't wait to hear more about it when you get to release it. That'll be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So, kind of starting off in your wine journey, you were a salesman for Leighton's Wine Merchants in London.
Yep.
And, you've always kind of gone around saying, you're selling Bordeaux and Burgundy wines to silly people at silly prices. How did all that come about? Like, why sell wine at such a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got introduced to wine pretty early when I was like stocking shelves basically at Marks and Spencer, which is like a grocery store in the UK, and the lady who kind of ran the wine department was kind of fun and eccentric, and I used to have to put the wine away, and it kind of intrigued me. And then I went to college and kind of drank more wine and got interested in it from like a scientific perspective, I'd say, because my undergraduate was like animal science because I wanted to be a vet originally. And after graduating, I actually took a job in a pharmaceutical public relations company briefly. And that was not interesting at all. And
I can imagine.
yeah, I just kind of was like, wine is more of a passion, and I was just looking for a wine job in London just to stay in London because London's a lot of fun basically. And saw a job advertised for Leighton's, which I really didn't know much about the history of it, but it turns out it's quite a famous wine store in London. And got introduced to it, and lots of wines that I had no idea where they should be in a cellar and how to pronounce them. But I had to kind of deliver these wines on a push bike to all the ambassadors' houses in and around like Elizabeth Street and Sloane Square, Victoria Station. So yeah, that was really kind of my first introduction to fine wine. And I mean, I only say it's like silly wine to silly people just because if you can afford to spend £1,000 on a bottle of wine, it's kind of ridiculous, like
it kind of is. So I mean, yeah, I think that is kind of silly myself, but if I had that sort of money, maybe I would do it. I don't know.
No bottle of wine is worth that amount of money. Like,
yeah.
I mean, managing a vineyard and knowing how much it costs to farm and how much it costs to make. Sure, it's expensive when you're small production, but a lot of those wines are not small production, and they're still
No.
£1,000 a bottle, So it's just what the market, can sustain, I suppose, and the image that they've built up over the years. But then I went to work for another wine merchant. If you know, like Fuller's London Beer, London Pride.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
They're
haven't heard of it.
a brewery in Chiswick, making like cask conditioned ales, but they had 3 fine wine stores at the time, in and around like West London. One of them was like Ravenscourt Park, where I lived. The other was like Chiswick, and then I think there was one in like High Street, Kensington. And I started selling wine for those guys. And the manager of that store was married to Teresa Nobilo, who is from New Zealand, from the House of Nobilo, which was acquired by one of the big guys many years ago. But I spoke to her and got a harvest placement in New Zealand in Marlborough, and that kind of just to see if I wanted to pursue winemaking as a career, really. And it was beautiful, That was 1998, I think. Just kind of sitting in the Marlborough area, and I remember like one moment where I was pumping Sauvignon Blanc juice into a 6,000-gallon tanker to get shipped to Auckland, because they had 2 wineries, and that happened a lot, shipping between Marlborough and Auckland, and just sitting on the top of the tanker waiting for it to fill, watching the sunset over Marlborough was pretty beautiful. I was like, this is all right, Like, why not?
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
would be amazing.
So
I
yeah.
I'm just curious to go back a little bit. So you were at Layton's, and you ended up, like delivering balancing 4 cases of wine on your push bike.
Yeah, there was a big like front basket that was deep, and you could like fit 4 full cases, like 12 bottles, which at first it seemed a bit silly, but you kind of got used to it. Like
I'm sure you did get used to it, but I mean, holy cow! Have you been able to use those skills any other time in your life?
just like balancing skills. Like the
Yeah.
hardest part was getting it off, as you can imagine. Like when you put the stand up on the bike, how do you get it off without it falling off?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a whole balancing thing. That was. Oof. Did
Yeah.
did did at any time do you have any catastrophes where it kind of fell over and you broke some expensive bottles or anything?
No, not on that, but I do remember like clients that were much closer. The store was so close to some very very posh area of London, so you would like wheel the dolly down the street, the
Hmm.
push cart down the street,
Oh yeah.
and like someone had ordered like just some soda water that back then came in a glass bottle, like a small glass bottle, and it was shrink
Right,
wrapped
right.
in plastic, but the plastic had been torn open, and I was pushing it
Oh,
down the street, like on top of 4 cases of wine, and a bottle kept falling out here and in there, just like this trail of soda water bottles down the street. I was like, well, what do they want me to do?
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Funny.
Uh, so you had just finished, pressing, some Sauvignon Blanc on, a 6,000-gallon tanker, and just looking at the sunset in Marlborough, and you're like, it just doesn't get much better than this. Uh,
Yeah.
and so where did that lead you to?
Well, I had started like applying for a scholarship through the Rotary Foundation, um, and each district within Rotary clubs worldwide still offers these Rotary ambassadorial scholarships that you compete for amongst the Rotary clubs in the district. And so, it's an opportunity to go to another country essentially and kind of assimilate into that country, and study something that you want on a graduate level. And so, I applied for the scholarship, and and was lucky enough to win it. And at the same time, I was applying to the University of Adelaide in South Australia to study enology, which is the chemistry of winemaking. And yeah, got offered the position, and yeah, moved to Australia in 2000, like to study in Adelaide. And back then there were only like 5 universities in the world that offered like an enology program. And I'd originally applied to South Africa, but the course was only offered in Afrikaans, and I was like, well, I don't really want to study organic chemistry in a different language. So
Yeah, that would be hard.
I ended up moving to Australia, where I'd spent time previously. I'd spent quite a lot of time in Australia, to be honest. So it was very normal for me. But yeah, it was a fantastic program, like really hands on, and yeah, probably some of the best days of my life spent there. I would say studying enology. It's fun.
Very, very cool. Oh, I know your dad plays an important, part in your overall story. Um, what did he have any? How did he help you, or kind of like be your cheerleader or whatnot, through all this phase of your life?
Well, yeah, he was really a big influence. More so, after he died in 2007, like,
Right,
and we, he was definitely very supportive of me going to Australia and studying winemaking. I mean, I think he had kind of given up on me before that, to be honest, and thought I was just going to travel the world and as a backpacker for the rest of my life and not get a real job. But then the kind of wine bug hit, and kind of, it's something that's, I think it's something that, I'm his age now, like, so something that you're really into when you get a little bit older, and kind of fascinating. And so I could see how it was something that he was interested in, and therefore it was something that he was like, well, that's cool that my son's 24 and has figured out that he doesn't want to be an accountant, a lawyer, an insurance broker, or a banker, which is like basically the four options that you have when you're in England. I feel like when you get to when you finish a lot of schooling, you always just end up getting pushed into those fields, because those are the
right,
ones you're going to make money in. but
exactly.
but yeah, right. But I chose the path that you're probably not going to make any money in, but just as a passion.
Right.
So yeah, he passed in 2007, but yeah, he was around for my move to Colorado, and to kind of see that all through. Um, but
And
unfortunately, not to start my first winery. So, yeah.
yeah, and weren't you all like talking about doing a winery or something together before you passed?
Yeah, I was making wine at a winery in Southwest Colorado, and there was an opportunity to kind of buy into it and be an owner, and so we were talking
Right.
about that, but yeah, that never materialized. Um, and it was a good thing that it didn't happen, but obviously it kind of it put like a bug in my ear about doing something on my own, which I've always felt like I um, have a complete disrespect for authority and don't want to be told what to do. So, um, especially when I feel like I could do it better myself. So, yeah, like being your own boss has always kind of been that thing that excited me most, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine. Then, after his passing, you got into a truck, and you drove like 25,000 miles across the US, going and getting equipment. I mean, how long did that take you?
It actually only we accumulated all the equipment in like a couple of months, um, and like, yeah, I think after he died, only it took me like 12 months to put together like a business plan, and find a space in Denver to lease to start a winery. And I was still working down in the Four Corners at that time. And yeah, there was just that moment that I was like, yeah, now's the time. Just say goodbye to the current boss, and yeah, move on. And bought like an old truck and a trailer, and like it was like back then, 2000, like May 2008, gas was like really expensive. Like it,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, the Great Recession, right? Like so like I remember like gas prices being like $8 a gallon or something. So
Yeah,
like the
that's
cost of
crazy.
freight of actually like hiring a company to do it was even more expensive than doing it myself. And so yeah, we just kind of drove around and picked up used equipment from various places all the way up the west coast, and then even into kind of Walla Walla and down back down into Denver. So yeah, that was stressful, but it was actually quite a lot of fun. Got some great photos of strapping tanks to trailers and not having enough space and strapping
Yeah,
fermentation bins to the end of the tank hanging off the back of the trailer.
I can only imagine. Do you still have that old Dodge truck that you drove around,
No,
gathering all that?
no, that got sold many years ago.
And so that kind of brings you to, starting like the first urban winery, Infinite Monkey Theorem.
Yeah,
Um, did you know that you're setting a trend at that time for urban winery, or you're just like this felt like or it just felt right?
I think it was all very deliberate. Like I had, I was working with a friend of mine, actually my best man, a guy called David Roy, and we did a harvest together in 2006. And we would always hang out and just talk about how wine was just so pretentious and so unapproachable, and we were both young. I mean, I was 28, like he was 24, and we were like, it doesn't have to be like this. Why don't we just figure out how to do something different? And so it was a plan that I think had formulated from speaking to so many people over the years. Like even you can definitely relate it to my time at Leighton's, selling silly wines to expensive people, and
Right.
the way wines were talked about, and then I think having spent time in Colorado and spent time selling wine in Denver for other wineries, it just kind of started to make sense, because like obviously Colorado is better known for its beer than wine, but there was a brewery kind of popping up on every corner in Denver, and it was like, well, why couldn't wine be like this? Why at the time I was like very kind of anti terroir and just like this is such nonsense, like, and
Right.
which for the most part it is, but it tells a good story, like. But yeah, so why not put a winery in downtown, like in a city? Like why not embrace city culture? You don't need to have Tuscan style facades on your wall, and like rolling hills and countryside to make good wine. You can make good wine anywhere, and
Right.
so why not do it in a back alley in downtown Denver in an old Quonset hut? And yeah, it like quickly. I mean, we made the first wines, and everyone in the city was excited about it. It was definitely a time when lots of small restaurants were starting who were very kind of conscious about where they were sourcing ingredients from, and having a good Colorado wine was something that was missing. And they were all my friends because they were all the same age as me, so they were all kind of embarking on starting like these cool restaurants at the same time as I was starting a winery, and it all just kind of made sense. So the name of the winery was somewhat irreverent, but really, but also very deliberate, and the artwork was all very like Bansky-esque graffiti style, and the story was intriguing, And so, and the wine was good. So it quickly became talked about, and I would say the most talked about winery in Colorado for sure. And then, of course, that whole kind of disrupting the wine industry, became more and more top of mind, and it was like, well, what's the craziest thing you can do? So let's put wine in a can before anyone else was doing it in the United States, at least.
Right.
Other than Coppola, I mean, they were doing it, but honestly, that brand at that time was a dead brand, because they could only produce those 187 ml cans once a year, because Bull Corporation only ran that can once a year. So they had to basically determine how much they would sell for an entire year, 12 months before. So it was impossible.
That's crazy.
And the wine was like from Indiana or something anyway. It was like Moscato and other nonsense with a straw. So we were the first to put wine in a 250 ml can, and I would say to make it cool, to kind of really address the accessibility of the packaging, and certainly when you're living in Colorado, you can kind of that makes a lot of sense, from a pack in, pack out.
And it does, but I mean, you spent like 2 years of R&D to make sure that the whole canned wine was actually good. And when you actually got through the R&D, you launched it at the Aspen Food and Wine Festival in 2011, and you just didn't launch it. You got like a smuggler mine or something there in Aspen, and you had all the mining carts lined with plastic and ice, and it was all loaded up. I mean, that had to be fun.
Yeah, that was cool. That was like, where's the craziest place you can like throw a party? Um, and looking back, there was probably a lot of liability issues around that. But I mean, what's the biggest wine festival in the United States? Certainly Aspen Food and Wine. And
Right.
where can you kind of make a big splash? And so we were friends with the owners of the mine. At least our publicist was, and we went up there and were like, we could do this. We could throw a party up here, and it was cool. There were like people get kind of entered on one level and got like a mine tour up to the top level where they grabbed a can of wine from an old ore truck lined with plastic, and there was a DJ up there, and I think we got like 85 noise complaints from the residents below the mine, and ultimately we're shut down around midnight, but not before making a big kind of splash, and then everyone started talking about it, which was cool. And we launched that with just one can. It was a black muscat from Colorado, which had been aged in a barrel. It was actually delicious. It was really cool. And the day of that party, we were on one of the panels at Food and Wine with it was which wine to pair with a taco cart, and it was led by Richard Betts, who is a master som, and on the panel was Charles Bieler from Bieler Family Wines that you've
Right.
heard of, and Andy Flowers from the Flowers Winery, and Bobby Stuckey from Frasca, and previously the French Laundry and the Little Nell, and then one other guy who I forget, but we were all talking about like alternate packaging and stuff, and we started talking about my black muscat can, and Charles Bieler sticks a pencil in it and shotguns it, throws it over his shoulder. I told him to do that, but it was funny, and there was 100 people in there like thinking this is ridiculous. What's wine in a can? And after it, like the owner of the Texas Rangers came up to me and was like, "You want to sell this wine at the stadium?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!"
Of course. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. It was funny, but that was. Well, I think those are the kind of fun things you can do when you're a small company that's very agile, and not scared to kind of shake things up a little bit. I think it was quite easy to do, just to kind of think about how you could like change things when it was an industry that resisted change and still is.
Right. Oh, it's there are a lot of traditions that are set in place. I mean, just talking about the foil on bottles. I mean, people are like, no, we can't get rid of foil on bottles, but it's like, but it would be a good thing to do for the climate. And what is the actual purpose of the foil? And so it's there are a lot of things that people are stuck in their ways in the world of wine.
Yeah, for sure. Like heavy bottles, which are just nonsense. Like foils, which are completely irrelevant. Uh, wire,
Yeah.
crown cages, and what wire hoods for sparkling wine. When the same wine has been under a crown cap for the last 12 to 3 years, like why not just put another crown cap on it? So it doesn't need that
Right.
cool. Yeah, funny.
Exactly, exactly. And getting into the sparkling a little bit, you did the Colorado's first ever method Champenois sparkling wine out of Arborino
Yeah,
grapes.
yeah, that's right. That was a while ago, like maybe I don't know, 2013, 2012, something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
Albarino seemed like a good grape to make sparkling wine with, and yeah, I didn't know a ton about the practical method. So got we had sponsored like a bike race in the previous year called the USA Pro Challenge, and I had met a bike rider called Craig Roma, who was formerly the head winemaker at Schramsberg, and so he was consulting because he had left there, and yeah, started talking about Method Champenois, and he was like, "Well, yeah, I'm a consultant. I'll help you out." I was like, "Okay."
Cool.
So yeah, we worked together for a couple of years and figured out how to do that kind of very very like hands on, very small production. Um, if talking about like a grower's champagne, I mean, this is more geeky than that. 180 cases, like hand riddled, hand disgorged, no dosage, single vineyard, like everything, everything done by hand, like
Right.
no neck freezer, like no, like yeah. So that was fun. My wife told me I had to make one, otherwise she'd divorce me. So we did it.
We got you got to keep the wives happy, most definitely.
That's right.
Uh, Coming from England, I mean, like the sparkling in England is just booming.
Yeah.
Jackson family is buying wine or buying property over there. Champagne families are buying property. I know next to nothing about English sparkling. Are there like any recommendations or anything that you might have?
Yeah, there's so many of them now. Um, like Chapel Down is probably the most well known producer, maybe the biggest producer from Kent, with vineyards, I think, in Kent and Sussex. Another one called Nye Timber. But yeah, I mean, they've been making like exceptional sparkling wine for the last 10 years, maybe even longer than that. And that's definitely because like climate change has raised a degree or two and enabled what was fairly impossible and infrequent. Made it more practical and commercially viable to produce consistent wine year in year out. And certainly when it comes to like sparkling base wine, remember it doesn't have to get ripe particularly. It's not about that.
Right.
It's not about hang time or anything because they certainly don't have hang time there. But,
Right.
but yeah, they're making really great sparkling wines, and I think a few of them are available in the US, and I know they're starting to export more because their production has ramped up considerably.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious about that. I appreciate it. You were mentioning Kent, and your label, The Ordinary Fellow, was inspired after a pub there in Kent. What was the name of the pub, and what brought you that inspiration?
Yeah, the Ordinary Fellow was a pub in Kent, in my home county, that I used to go to with my father when I was younger, and just a very warm, comfortable place to relax after a day's work, and have a few beers and kind of put the world to rights and go home. And I was reminded of the pub after my father died. He had collected these pub cards, which back in the '60s were found in the back of cigarette packs. So I think in the US, if you're a smoker, you would get baseball cards in the back of cigarettes back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but in England, they were pub cards, and it basically was a card size, and it had the symbol or the logo from the pub, like the sign that hung outside the pub on the front, and then it talked about the history of the pub on the back. And I found this big pile of them that my mother gave me after he died, and I was like, oh, these are cool. And so like I framed them, and there's maybe 500 of them, like on a frame on the wall. And
Wow.
I was looking for kind of inspiration for a name for my new winery, and I was like, oh yeah, the Ordinary Fellow. And the on the label, the kind of front logo is actually the blade sign. That's the sign that hung from the silhouette of the sign that hung from the pub,
Right.
which is meant to be the silhouette of King George IV, who considered himself an ordinary fellow.
That is very cool. That's, I read that, it was inspired, but I just hadn't heard the actual backstory or anything of that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so when you look at you've got part of my back label behind you, like it's
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, there's like lots of pub references there, and there's a forklift with a pint of Guinness on it, because all winemakers do is drive forklifts and drink beer, and then it's quite an old joke. And then there's like the Three Lions, which is emblazoned on the English soccer jerseys, and there's dart, and there's like the angle of release and the speed that you throw a dart at, and there's a dartboard, and there's all sorts of like references on the under label of my bottle, which has two labels, like an under label and an outer sleeve.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I was just curious, like, how did you, I mean, you've set like, you know, the wine in the can, and then, urban winery, and then this. I mean, what made you think of doing something like this to like be different and unique?
It was really more like, I mean, I think I've always kind of pushed the boundaries in terms of packaging, and with this, it was coming up with like a concept that was kind of like this hidden imagery, like a codex, and trying to
Hmm.
bring it to life on a three-dimensional bottle. Um, and so we kind of came up with the under label, which is basically a story of my journey as a winemaker, with lots of very personal um, imagery on it. Like there's a silhouette of my family, my dog who I just let out. There's like an old black beanie that I would wear when I'm making wine, which is right here. That's on the level. There's a lot of kind of cool stuff on there, but there's also a story. If you take the sleeve off, you'll read it. It's very flowery story of me meeting a bear when I'm camping in Colorado, and the descriptive words in the story come through the outer sleeve to complete the tasting note. So you can
Mm.
align, when you align it correctly, the tasting notes are completed on the outer sleeve, and there's certain call outs that come through on the artwork, and just the engineering that was required to bring that together. There's one thing designing it from an artist standpoint, right? But then to like bring it to life so that the sleeve would not fall off, and so that it was in the correct place, and so that it would rotate, and so that the words came across correctly when it was aligned correctly. I mean, just an amazing feat of engineering. And yeah, I mean, I think a picture paints 1,000 words. I think 80% of customers still make wine purchase decisions on the label alone. So I do think it's important to have a good label, one that tells a story, and it kind of sucks you in, and it also allows the customer to kind of interact with it, which I think is cool. Certainly when it's at home on your dining table, but also if you're in a restaurant and you had bought the bottle and you were kind of like playing around with it, as you were talking,
right?
It would provoke conversation, which is what wine in general does anyway. Like when you're just drinking it, it does it. But then it's a work of art on its own. The wine is a work of art and the label is. So I think it's like a complete package. And I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to the wine label, or just come up with something that's so generic and that it's this is someone's put a lot of thought into this. Took like over 12 months to come up with it. So it's very cool.
It is very cool, and I can only imagine. I'm being an engineer at heart. All the engineering that it took to actually put that on and make it happen. I can only imagine. It's very unique, and it also goes to show just how forward thinking you are, and it is gorgeous. It is amazing. And also, the other night I poured your 2021 Pinot, and I was just right off two facts that just got me all giddy about it when I looked at it in the glass. I mean, it was just a gorgeous Pinot. Just looking at it, I was like, "Ooh, I'm in for a treat." And then also to see that the vineyard that it came from, the Hawk's Nest vineyard, is at 6,800 feet in elevation. And I'm here in Oregon, so for us, anything above 900 feet to 1,100 feet is over the top, as far as elevation goes.
Yeah.
It just boggles my mind at 6,800 feet, how Pinot is able to thrive.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, that's how you get like cool climate when you're basically in a hot climate, right? You go up in elevation, and of course Colorado's fairly high anyway, right? Denver's a mile high. Palisade on the western slope is at 4,500 feet, and then southwest Colorado, like Cortez, where my Riesling, Chardonnay, and Cab are grown, is at 5,800 feet, and the vineyard called the Hawk's Nest is at 6,800 feet, and it's definitely a marginal climate, I would say. Bud break is obviously later, and then the potential to get an early fall frost is considerable come like mid-October. But yeah, just a really great vineyard site planted by this chap called Guy Drew 4 years ago. So it's only the second crop off of it, and he's grown Pinot Noir and Chardonnay there. But yeah, just like when you're talking about the color, I think it's the color of real Pinot Noir that hasn't been adulterated by Syrah or something, and just great natural acidity. I mean, the color of it belies like the power of it and the intensity of it, because like you smell it and you're like, whoa, and then you put it in your mouth and it's like it's like a serious wine, and a lot of people I pour it for who don't know anything about Burgundy are like, oh, it's very light. And I'm like, you got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, but once I got past, just being blown away by the elevation and just the beautiful color in the glass, I loved how velvety smooth it was. and how the tannins were just nicely integrated and all the fruit was just showing in all the right places. I was, um, you know, I don't think, I think that's the first time I've had a Pinot from Colorado, and
Yeah.
I was a little apprehensive, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And so, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. No, yeah, it's a variety that I've had like a love hate relationship with for 25 years, I'd say. Um, and really, my first real opportunity to make a Pinot Noir in maybe 15 years. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, as soon as you got it in the winery, you know it's going to be a good wine. I mean, fruit was good, fermentation smelled good. You could tell it was going to be good. And they just spent 8 months in some neutral French oak barrels. So they were like 8, 9 year old barrels. So no real oak
Wow.
influence in there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and just well balanced fruit coming off the vine, which is really makes the winemaking job pretty easy, I'd say.
I can imagine. And, I have your cab here. And I haven't had a Colorado cab either. We were talking about 6,800 feet for the cool climate for Pinot, and I think you said that your cab vineyard is at 5,800 feet.
Yeah,
How does that ripen enough to make a cab?
yeah, that's a good question because, like, yeah, you would think, um, like, the growing season is in Colorado is between like 155 and 170 days compared to Napa, that's like 250 days. So it's very short, right? But at high elevation, you get like high concentrations of ultraviolet light, which kind of speed up ripening. And when you look at the number of degree days, we have the same number of degree days as Napa in Colorado. So depending
Okay.
on the site, like a later ripening varietal like Cab will get ripe. Some years, depending on where it's grown, it won't, and it's just very herbaceous. But but yeah, like if you get like a long extended fall, you can certainly ripen it. And like I think I've said earlier on, I didn't pick the cab till like 5 days ago, so that's pushing it. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and then we had a frost, so it's a good job I picked it. But
Yeah. Yeah. I can only imagine.
yeah,
Oh, so you have two younger children, and like your father played a nice influence on your trajectory and like what you have done. Have you given any thought to like what kind of legacy that you want to leave them?
I mean, really, just to try and be around for them more, I think, and just be a good dad is like, and not be working the whole time, which is tough when you have a winery.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think every winemaker parent, probably thinks it's pretty cool for their kids to grow up in that environment. Like, just it's not a usual career path. It's
mhm,
like it can be very beautiful. It can certainly like show them the meaning of hard work because until you've done a harvest, you don't really understand how hard that can be. I don't think. Um,
yeah.
I read there's a great article. I'll try to send it to you, but it compares working a harvest to living on a pirate ship, and it's like no showers and just everyone hates each other and
Oh
just
man,
you know
that would be an interesting article.
it's really great. It's a really great story.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I hope that, that they understand the value of hard work and that we get to experience cool stuff together, and whatever they end up doing, is hopefully influenced by that at some stage.
yeah. I can only imagine. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I try to do the best that I can for her as well. So doing the best that we can is all we can do.
Right. Yeah. They're still pretty young, mine, like 9 and 7. So they got
That's
away.
awesome. Yeah. Well, I have some rapid fire questions here for you, and then I'll get you out of here.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite artist to listen to during harvest?
Ooh. Well, this year I've been listening to a lot of like the Wu-Tang Clan, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think when the people come in to taste wine, they're not quite expecting it. Sometimes
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Your favorite indulgent food?
Oh, dear. That's it. Well, like what I really eat right now would just be a good bowl of green chili.
Oh,
It's
it's a perfect time of the year for that too.
yeah. It's so complex and interesting.
Yes. If you could choose a superpower, what would it be?
To look into the future.
Nice. Harvest notes, are they digital or handwritten?
Neither.
No, that's great. That is great. And the last book you read, it could be physical, it could be audible, or it could even be like a podcast or something.
Oh, the last book I read. Well, actually, I've been listening to a podcast called The Wine Blast by Peter and Susie. I can't remember their last names, but they're two MWs who are very funny, irreverent,
Yes.
and also very entertaining and have a lot of knowledge to share if you're really interested in wine.
Yeah, no, that is a great podcast. I've listened to that a handful of times myself.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you. Do you have, any questions or anything for me before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, though,
Oh, yeah.
for doing this. I appreciate it, and hopefully you get to try those other wines, and they're not too bad. So.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to it, and just taking my time, just enjoying all the hard work that you have done, and I can't wait to dive into them. So thank you so much for that too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you got any questions on them, just shoot me an email.
I will do so. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining me on this flavorful voyage through the world of wine on the Weinnotes podcast. I've been your host and guide, AJ Weinzettel, and it's been an absolute pleasure sharing these captivating stories with you. But alas, like the last sip of a fine vintage, our time together must end. But don't fret, my wine-loving friend. The cellar doors of the Weinnotes podcast will always remain open, waiting for you to return and explore new conversations, stories, and musings from the captivating people behind the magical world of wine. Before you go, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and don't forget to leave a sparkling 5-star review to help spread the word. Until our glasses clink again, remember to savor life's moments and let the spirit of wine and camaraderie linger on your palate. Cheers, and as always, may your wine glass be full, your heart be light, and your journey